Blizzard solved WoW's oldest problem. That's right, WoW's oldest problem. What could that possibly be? I haven't pre-watched this, so I don't really know what he's talking about. But here we go. Let's dive straight in. What is WoW's oldest problem? And Blizzard solved it. Let's see what this is all about from Bellular.
Every WoW expansion has had the same problem, in that it's got to take you somewhere new, somewhere you've never been, somewhere you don't know, and have to learn to care about. Now this was fine whenever Blizzard was adapting Warcraft 3. Outland and Northrend were places we'd already fought over. They already felt quite rich in the lore, so a lot of our investment was kind of preloaded.
True.
But everything since then has been fighting uphill. Pandaria, Draenor, Broken Isles, Kul'Tiras, Shadowlands, Dragon Isles, Khazalgar. Some of these places have been great, but I think they all asked you to build attachment mostly from scratch. And in an MMO with a compressed main story and limited quest runtime, that can be a tall order.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the lore, he's right. I mean, Northrend lore, that was already so fleshed out in Warcraft 3 and everything. People were excited to go there. We already knew Northrend existed long before it ever existed in WoW. So that was like he said, preloaded into our minds already. Pandaria was a tough one for Blizzard. It was a tough sell from the very beginning because of the Kung Fu Panda comparisons and shit like that. But in reality, I think Pandaria had amazing lore. I think it had amazing architecture, music, and everything. People who didn't give Pandaria a real chance, I think missed out. That was actually like probably I think Mists of Pandaria goes down as one of the most underrated expansions in all of WoW history. I actually had fun in Mists of Pandaria. I think the island was beautiful. Like I said, the music, the architecture, everything was like really, I enjoyed it. And I think a lot of people just, wrote it off and never even freaking tried playing it, which is sad because I think that part of the game was actually really good and well done by Blizzard. But yeah, I agree with this. And I think what he's getting at here is, we had all these new islands and shit coming out with expansions. I think that's always been a thing. It's like World of Island Craft people talk about all the time. And what Blizzard did here is they decided to revamp old land. And by revamp, they basically completely rebuilt it. I mean, this part of the Eastern Kingdoms now feels completely new. And I've been enjoying going through it a lot. I think it's been a lot of fun for sure. And I think they got a lot of good feedback about this. I hope they continue to do this shit. Because I think rebuilding Old Azeroth is a much better time investment right now than giving us a 30-second island on this in the world.
Midnight does not do that, because Midnight goes home. And what this expansion gets from that is absolutely huge. Now, I've leveled from 80 to 90, I've played every zone, of course, I've made a start into the end game, so here's where I've landed thus far with this expansion.
Pandaria is canon, yes it is.
Days.
Where it clicked.
Midnight begins with the Sunwell under siege. We immediately go there, we're immediately in the fight. It's a good enough spectacle, it's fairly snappy, and actually, the narrative stuff does feel pretty good. The Light Wielders are there pouring everything that they've got into the Sunwell to hold the Void at bay, which is a clean narrative move, because with the Army of the Light, the cavalry, the reinforcements, being pinned down, when you then have to spread out and go through the zones, it does actually feel like there's a good sense of urgency.
Yeah, and I feel like with this story right now, it's like quintessential WoW. Like this whole story so far feels very Warcraft. It does. You got Light, you got Void, Paladins, and all this other shit going down. It doesn't feel that foreign. Whereas like when you got to tell a story about Shadowlands and all this other fucking lore that you literally got to develop in these short quest lines, that's a lot bigger undertaking. A much harder task for sure. Like we've been reintroduced to the Amani Trolls. We already knew the Amani Trolls. There's tons of Amani Troll lore already out there. We know about the Troll Wars and everything else. The hatred between the elves and the trolls and these backstories and everything. The newest thing that Blizzard has had to introduce us to is the Harendar, and we already got a taste of them in the War Within anyways, so that's not that big of a deal. But essentially what I'm saying here is Blizzard can get deeper into these stories because we already have a baseline of lore. We already know all this shit. Silvermoon, not new. The Light, not new. The Void, not new. So we get to get more character depth development and everything. Where in Shadowlands and expansions like that, they got to explain this entire fucking world. There's no time to tell us about the Jailer because we have to figure out what the fuck Torghast is. And what the Shadowlands is all about. And the fucking Arbiter and the Sky Dildo Ouroboros and all this other shit. We'd have no time for character development. So I think this type of storytelling, which is more grounded in WoW lore, is much better and easily digested. Yeah, the Sky Dildo, that's right.
Because that crisis is always ticking over back at the Sunwell. So that's quite smart. It works well And I particularly liked how, when I look at the various characters that are pulled in here, they actually feel like they are leaders of their various factions and groups. It doesn't feel like a tiny story driven by the personal dramas between a few different characters. Yes, there are tensions between those characters, but, say, Turalyon very much is seen as the commander of the Army of the Light. The Army of the Light actually do feel like their own little sub-faction within Azeroth.
Yeah,
That's
do.
quite good, because when we're dealing with these groups, as actual groups, in the overall lore and setting, it helps the MMO feel like a big world, as opposed to a bunch of character melodrama, with the character melodrama driving the story rather than the actual stakes, the groups, the power that they've got, the forces that they've got. So that'll work quite well. But you know what? That's not the main thing that got me. What got me was stepping into a rebuilt Eversong. Some of that's personal. The Burning Crusade was formative for me. I always loved this part of the game world. But the thing about remakes of things you love is they almost never feel right. Something is always off. And we see that even within World of Warcraft. The Cataclysm revamp did a bunch of cool things, but I think a lot of zones lost what made them feel unique.
And
what
I think
I'll say
that's
here,
the big difference. He's totally right. That's the big difference between this revamp and what Cataclysm did. And I talked about this as I was playing through Midnight with you guys on stream. I said it. I was like, these zones still feel like the original zones, even though they got, the Dead Scar is gone. The plague, a lot of this shit looks completely different, and a lot of parts of it. But it makes sense in terms of lore of why it looks the way it does, and it still feels like the old zones. It does. They haven't wrecked them. What Cataclysm did was it took like iconic old zones where you have memories and everything and just completely ripped them apart, clapped its cheeks, tore it up, and put a tornado in the middle of it, and it looks nothing like it previously did. A lot of those changes were not well taken by the community, and I think that's why Blizzard has been hesitant to touch the world ever since. But they decided to go all in, and they really did go all in. I mean, they like tripled and doubled the size of a lot of these parts of the world right now, and I think they did such a good job in remaking them. Like I said, I'm going through the Amani Troll lands right now. There are parts of the land where, remember when I was questing through it, I was like, oh my God, I remember being here. Like I remember this the entrance into AZ and all that shit. Like it all brings back memories, and at the same time, it's up-res and revamped so nicely that it looks brand new. And they did a really good job with it. And they said themselves in interviews, Ian said that we're going to look at how players react to these imagined revamped zones, and if they react really well to it, we're going to continue to do this going forward. So I hope they do, because I think they did a great job.
is I don't feel that something's wrong, that something is off. Silvermoon, Eversong, the settlements that I ran through as a new player, all felt correct. Not just pretty, but correct. Now I know some people wish there was more of a scar.
I say AZ, I meant ZA, Zul'Aman.
There are a few things about Blood Elves. I personally think the Blood Elves moving on a bit from the Fel and the Scar stuff being healed over, which, by the way, is actually lore accurate. I'm fine with that stuff. It doesn't really kill the experience for me. I know not everybody agrees with that, though, and they would prefer the Blood Elves felt more like they did whenever they were new, and did have a bit more edge to them. I'm certainly sympathetic to that. But the core thing here isn't really those details. You see, the questing that you go and do is standard enough Warcraft fare, right? Basically, Army of the Light's pinned down, you go into Eversong, there's this light bloom problem that's stemming from the Sunwell that actually leads us into the Amani Trolls and also into Harendar, and that stuff's all solid. It's not revolutionary. I mean, WoW quests are still WoW quests. But the thing that was different is that I cared. I felt I cared immediately, and without effort. And I compare that to the War Within. Hallowfall was cool. The zones were well made, but engaging with them required work. You had to learn to care about somewhere entirely new, with new factions, new stakes, new geography, new twists and lore that could be confusing.
Yeah, new characters.
That ended up being a big enough ask, and I certainly saw the impacts of that in the comments.
Yeah.
What I can say...
It's very hard to compare some of these new characters to, say, like a Lorthamar, or an Anduin or a Turalyon, where we've gotten lore over a decade, man. Over 2 decades for some of these characters. I mean, Anduin's been around since the beginning. He was a child. We watched him grow up. So how do you take that level of character depth and development and compare it to somebody who just got introduced to the game, and now you got to fucking learn all about them as you're learning about new lands and a new boss and a new problem and everything else? It's difficult to do. So that's why I think like right now we care much more about the lore in Midnight than we did on a lot of previous expansions because it just makes sense. It's been around all the time. Look back at some of our favorite expansions, Wrath of the Lich King. Easy lore. It's been around from the very beginning. Burning Crusade and Legion. You know, people talk about Legion all the time. That lore was already established. Burning Legion, Sargeras, I mean, shit, that's been around for forever. Gul'dan, like, we knew all these guys. So, a lot of the time when the lore is already developed and we're dealing with characters and storylines that have been around for a decade, 2 decades, you attach to it much more easily. And that's why I feel like this storyline is just so much nicer for us than a lot of these storylines we've gotten in previous expansions.
Being a big enough ask, and I certainly saw the impacts of that in the comments. What I can say here is that for me, falling back into the world felt absolutely effortless. And that is a huge win that Midnight has that just about no other WoW expansion has got. And of anything I'll bring up in this video, I think that is my main takeaway, and it was fairly obvious to me within the first hour of playing. Now, there are other things to talk about with Eversong, right? I mean, Lorthamar, I think he deserves a call out. He's voiced and written like an actual leader. You can feel the strain of holding his city together under all of the pressure balancing, you know, the army of the light.
Even Grand Magister Romath. I mean, I didn't know much about him. I obviously knew he was like a badass Blood Elf mage from a long time ago. But he's had really cool moments, blasting a fucking guy apart. Like he's questioned a lot of this shit. All these people in the cities, he struggled with it. So I think a lot of good character developments happen.
Right, being a little bit extreme at times, the Void Elf tensions, the factional disagreements. That stuff is properly compelling, and because it's happening at that bigger level of, well, factions, it actually feels like things are happening in the setting, as opposed to melodrama. But I've already made that point. With that said, let's start talking about the zones. So, from Eversong, things then branch out. You can go to Zul'Aman, you can go to Harendar, or you can go and do an Arator questline. But I'll do Zul'Aman first because I think it's the stronger of these two zones. Basically, it's a fairly tight troll narrative. It's really quite well done. Atalaman has been devastated by the Void. There's very obvious big Void problems, so you go in there, you help them, they get absolutely battered, and then, you know, you go through some quests, reuniting some tribes, reconnecting with Loa, that sort of thing, brokering uneasy alliances, such as between the Blood Elves and the Amani Trolls. It's all fairly core Warcraft stuff. But what makes it work is, I think, actually what they don't do. Now, there are bits where, and I'll talk about dialogue later, but some stuff is so laid on thick, on the nose, and, you know, almost primary school level that I think the dialogue really does let them down. But one thing I did really like is there's this stuff with the brother character.
Yes.
He's the sort of dude who would charge into battle, get a bunch of his allies killed, the type who would choose violence in a way that isn't measured or strategic.
Yeah, I said it. I told you guys when I was questing, I thought Zul'Aman was a cool character. Whether or not he likes me as an Alliance player, I mean, that doesn't matter. I just think he's a cool character. Like, I understand him. Like, we get introduced to Zul'Aman very early on. Arator saves him from his dad, you know, that fucking moment, whatever. And then, you know, you get him. He's like just straight. He is who he is. He don't fuck around. He's ready to freaking chop anybody's head off. And, you know, you just got to watch your back around him. But at the end of the day, he just wants his people to be strong as fuck. That's his goal. You can tell right away. Pretty blunt. I enjoy his voice lines. I enjoy his banter with his sister. I think he's a cool character. And he's probably going to become very relevant in the next patch, too. I think he's going to, the rumors are he's going to get a bit too crazy, right? Try to go after power maybe in the wrong ways, and that's what's going to open up the next raid or something.
Choose violence in a way that isn't measured or strategic. And he doesn't get a clean redemption by the end.
Zul'Aman's too impulsive, no think, all action. Right, but we get it. Like, that's him. You totally understand. There's real life people like that. He doesn't have to have like this crazy depth, you know, this back. He's just he's reminiscing about his people's past, right? They were a glorious empire, and he's trying to bring that back. He's very blunt. He's very reckless and all this shit, but you get it. That's who he is. He's Zul'Aman. And I just think that it's kind of nice to have a character like that. That he's just he is who he is. Because I think he's kind of badass.
Glad his people survived. He's glad that you guys have went and done your quest. But you can tell that he's unresolved. And you think, well, maybe he'll turn out good. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll
I haven't gotten to this moment in the game, but this is really cool. I like this character development here. I think they did a good job with him.
I just like how Blizzard left that thread hanging with him, rather than tying it off in a cheesy bow where everyone learns their lesson and has a big hug at the end.
Yeah, exactly. He hugs his sister, and now thank you for showing me the way, sister. No, that hasn't happened, and I'm glad that hasn't happened.
This stuff does get fairly tiresome. As for the rest of things, well, the zone is gorgeous. The just hewn stonework of the old troll temples is an absolute standout, so absolutely nailed the brief. I will note that there is some of the dialogue between Liadrin and the trolls that just comes off a little bit weird to me. I don't want to say it's like a bunch of well-meaning people have accidentally went and done a bit of a Noble Savages sort of trope in how they've done the story, but I just think the dialogue was painting with primary colors so much that I think a lot of nuance that really would have served the story well just wasn't really able to shine through. Now, thankfully, there's a lot of great stuff in the side quests here, and I think what Blizzard was trying to do was well-meaning, just their handling of dialogue wasn't great, and that is going to be a running theme throughout this video. Now, Harendar is a little bit of a dip for me.
Yeah.
It's a zone that was clearly reworked from the War Within, and I think you can feel that. So. There's just something about it. The Harendar still do feel a bit pulled from a hat. And what I think is weird about the Harendar is...
And remember what I said early in the video, like the race that they introduced and the new shit that basically came in is the Harendar. So it's just not going to hit as hard as other races and characters and storylines that have been in development for years and years and years. The Harendar have been around for less than a year. We've been just dealing with them. They're there. Yes, they were... When I say less than a year, yes, they showed up in the War Within. But in reality, we just didn't we didn't deal with them for months on end, for entire patches. Where are the Harendar? Oh, I don't know, they're fucking playing with their roots somewhere. So like in reality, we've been dealing with them, like actual time spent with them. It's been less than a year, probably a month total. We just dealt with their storyline and that was it. So they definitely feel like they have less depth. They definitely feel shoehorned into this expansion. I said this before, I feel like these guys were supposed to be in the War Within. This entire zone was supposed to be in the War Within. And then Metzen pulled it out, put it in Midnight so he can work in the Ethereals and Void lore at the end of the War Within because he needed to figure out how to tie this into a longer expansion because the War Within was just supposed to end the Azeroth storyline. So I bet you can tell, I haven't gone through this storyline yet. We'll see how it actually feels. But I already knew this was going to be the weakest part of Midnight for sure.
There are ways to make them feel way more natural within the lore and, within the setting. You can talk about dark trolls at the Well of Eternity. You can kind of look at all the migration patterns in Warcraft Chronicle. And I think all of that lore is actually fairly cool. And a bunch of the lore that they've made for the Harendar, I think, is also really quite strong. It's just that Blizzard kind of had existing races and lore that I think could have served the same purpose. Yeah. I think that would have led to a more cohesive game that was spending more time exploring things rather than telling players about things from a big new lore lens that involves a whole bunch of additional, learning and synthesis, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I think you could have totally worked in roots and, Azeroth's World Soul and all that shit with, the Earth Mother lore from the Tauren. You could have also worked it in with, Elune lore and shit like that from the Night Elves. I don't think you needed to introduce a new race into the game just to get this lore across. I think there's already races in the game that are very in tune with the Earth and everything else like that, both on the Alliance and the Horde, that could have served this purpose. These guys coming in felt like they're just checking the box of adding another playable race. I don't know. That could have been Ethereals, and people, I think, would have been much more happy with that. So, yeah, this whole thing is okay, we got a new race, the Harendar. Are they somewhat sexually attractive? Yes, they are. I don't know why I said that, but it's the truth. So, it's weird. I don't know why they're here. They're here. We wanted to get some Avatar guys in the game, I guess, or something, and we're going to deal with their lore for what it is. Same as there's nothing furry about her, okay? She's just kind of a thick girl, and there's something about her.
That involves a whole bunch of additional, learning and synthesis, I guess. And I say that because WoW's main storylines always do feel too compressed and too fast. And in a world where that just is how they are, I think adding new factions over exploring existing ones is often hard to justify. But as I said, the deeper lore is actually interesting. The cave paintings, the forces of life is something dangerous, potentially, rather than benign. All of the connections back to Draenor as well. Those are fantastic. The Draenor lore about, say, the Apexis civilization, which is a light-worshipping civilization, everything with the Spore Mound and the Botany, that stuff is fantastic, and it's actually quite nice to see it here. And I will say the music of Harendar is a particular standout as well.
Oh,
you can
nice.
feel their composers are kind of stretching towards something new, and I think they, by and large, did pull it off. But
They
Harendar is where the effortless investment that I talked about earlier, I know, investment emotionally, like player investment, it is where that breaks. Because it's the one zone that is very much built on stuff that is new, that felt underexplored in the War Within, and I just think that's a zone that isn't as engaging with the others. And in fairness, some of that's because of the context, of literally just how it exists, how it's came into being, and how that stuff was handled in the War Within. Meaning that for a lot of people, they're not exactly primed to be interested in the Harrenir, because the last time they saw the Harrenir just wasn't as interesting. But okay, let's talk about our big new character, our golden boy, Arator.
Okay, real quick, before he gives his opinion on Arator, I kind of like him. I do. Some people were like, oh, why is he bitching? Why is he crying? He's not crying or bitching, guys. Calm the fuck down. And everyone's like, he's 40 years old. He should be more mature. He's an elf. 40 years old in elf years. This guy's like a fucking 2-year-old, okay? He's still learning shit. And I think he's actually learning pretty quick, and everything that he's been reacting to and doing, to me, makes sense. Was it a bit melodramatic for him to jump in front of his father as he was going to hit Zul'Aman? Yeah, I mean, fucking dramatic moment, whatever. But his whole thing, where everyone was like, oh, he's crying in the cinematic. I said this before, I don't think he's crying in the fucking cinematic. He's struggling. He's just mentally struggling with Xal'atath fucking with him. Because, right, he's embracing this power of the light, and he's going full power, popping off on these voidies, and Xal'atath's telling him, hey, be careful with that power, my friend, because that shit might actually be bad for you. And so it's tripping him out. Because should he be going down this path? Should he be going full power? Or is this the wrong thing? Is there another way to deal with the light in a more safe way? Is this actually fucking him up? Why can't he remember parts of the fight? Why can't he remember what the fuck happened? It's just tripping him out a little bit. And it's all happening mid-fight. I thought that cinematic was really freaking cool. I did. And he's continued forward. Like, it's not like he went away or he quit because all this shit's going down with Xal'atath. He's still at the front lines fighting. So I kind of like his lore so far. I think he's cool. He's a crying little bitch. I disagree. I think he's pretty cool so far.
Look, I have a bit of an instinct in me that looks at Arator and almost like I want to roll my eyes and kind of think, oh, it's just another Anduin, isn't it? And there is a little bit of that. But I actually do think that the Arator questline worked, and his character has worked for me, I would say, more than I anticipated it would.
Anduin folded like a fucking lawn chair and ran away to the maw. Arator hasn't ran away from anything. He's literally just dealing with it on spot and continuing to fight. He's pushing through it. He's manning the fuck up. That's why I like his character.
But this isn't just a character review. One of the things that we get is a questline with Arator that just kind of works to give you a break from the zone hopping. And it's all lessons in the light, trying to reconnect with his father with the help of some old paladins who are trying to teach him things. Well, old paladins and priests. You go to great places. You visit Light's Hope Chapel, you go to the Burning Steps. There's blasts of nostalgia that do actually land really well for me. Yeah. And it all builds toward reconnecting Arator with Turalyon. So you reforge Turalion's old shield as,
I thought this was cool.
I don't want to say a peace offering, but there's been tension between the two characters. And the payoff here is great. Because while Turalyon does see his son, and I think does appreciate what was done, he does ultimately reject the shield. He says some wounds can't be healed. It's clear that he's not ready, that the 1,000 years of war that he spent in the Twisting Nether kinda broke something in him. And that's of course something that started off whenever light blindness first hit him in the battle, the Burning Steps. I like that Wizard didn't immediately go to the schmaltzy, oh look, the son did a cute thing and now, oh, everyone's embracing and there's reconciliation and it's all brilliant and happy.
That's right.
No, we don't get that. And I think the story is far better for it.
I think
a
so
worse
too.
version of Midnight would have just given you the hug here where the father takes the shield and says, son, You're right.
Yeah, if this was Dragonflight, that's what would have happened for sure. And that was the issue with Dragonflight. All this shit kept going down. Everyone kept hugging after. Like here, Terrellian, he's like, "Hey, thanks for the nice shield, son. I appreciate the gesture, but war is fucking real, and it fucked me up, man. It fucked me up, and this isn't gonna fix it. So it's not all happy endings here. You want to go get a massage, you can get that somewhere else." And whereas his son Arator then goes to hang up the shield, which I also liked in the Arcantina, and everyone's like, "Bro, don't be a bitch. All right, don't be a little bitch about this. That shield is actually a freaking badass shield. You should pick it up and use it. We need it for battle. We're in the middle of a war." And Arator's like, "You know what? Yeah, I'll fucking carry this shield. Why not?" And I thought that was a really cool moment too.
And everyone in the room grows and becomes more wise and good. That would have been boring. This
Shield's a
version
great
of the
item.
story has Arator realizing that his father isn't ready. Maybe he won't be ready soon.
Maybe he'll
and
never be
Arator
ready.
decides that
Yeah.
ultimately, well, he can only control what he can control. I think that's good. There's some narrative restraint there, and again, a type that Blizzard often is not able to display. Now, for some of my fellow deep lore people, there is the stuff about Eitrig and the Sons of Lothar. I've already talked about that at length. It did take away a bit from the experience here. It just meant that like we see Eitrig, and apparently a whole bunch of stuff has just happened off screen with him as a character, and maybe with the Sons of Lothar as a group. I just don't like Blizzard just kind of dropping these characters in and being like, "Oh yeah, they're all better now, by the way." That still does grate me, but it doesn't take away from the other aspects of this that I did actually like. And I think it all works especially well because it's
The Arathi lore in general, I think we might get a better understanding of Arathi lore and everything as we head into whatever post, the World Soul Saga is. But still, right now, the Arathi lore doesn't sit very good with me. Till now, when we went through all the quest line, we were talking shit about the Arathi past, and fuck that empire, and they had slaves and shit. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, look at real life. All that shit has existed before, and empires have fucked up many times, made many mistakes. But just the way he threw away the history, and he was like, "Ooh, fuck the Arathi. They never did anything right." And that whole thing just felt like it was a big throwaway of some of the coolest lore in the game. And then right now, they haven't really touched on it ever since. It's just been like, okay, we'll figure out the Arathi lore later. And that's why that whole quest line, I think, kind of hits a little bit flat.
Woven with lots of little scenes and vignettes of the Army of the Light maybe not being the best guests. And yes, seeing the zealotry that can be there with the light. I actually think they explore that stuff really well.
Yeah,
I've
I think
seen
the light stuff's really
some
good.
people on the internet just kind of say, "Oh, Blizzard are just trying to say the light is bad now and evil." And I mean, I understand where that opinion could come from. I don't think it really would have any basis in Warcraft, though. We've always had the likes of the Scarlet Crusade.
I didn't get that vibe, though. People are saying, oh, they're just saying the light is bad. Did they not read well, this is what happens. People don't read shit in the game. Did they not read the weapons that we went through in the Paladin Order Hall? Do you remember that whole part of the quest line where Alonzus Fowl, who, by the way, badass character, I love what he's done so far in this expansion. We're going through it was in Light's Hope Chapel. We're going through and we're looking at all the weapons, and Arator's like, "Damn, there's some really badass stories in here, like people using the light for really good shit. Maybe the light's not all fucked up. Maybe Xalatet's trying to make me think the light's all bad, when in reality, it's just like another power or another weapon that can be used for good or evil. And really, it's the wielder of the light that can decide whether it's good or bad, not the light itself." And I thought that was a really cool thing. And we went through all the history, who all those people were in Light's Hope Chapel, what each statue represented. I thought that was really cool. I didn't think at all that Blizzard's saying all the light is bad. If you got that, I think you just didn't read shit. I mean, that's what happened.
Who have always been treated as very much villainous and misguided. So I think the way that they've handled the light and the void together...
The light trying to force itself on Illidan, Sam, you remember that? Well, I think that was Zira, though. I don't know if you could just attribute her action to the light. She's a Naru. We don't really know what Naru are yet. Still, they're kind of like mysterious. She's like maybe a manifestation of light. But clearly she had her fucking thing that she wanted to turn Illidan to the light. Whatever that was, she was trying to save the world, I guess. There's some kind of prophecy she was trying to fulfill. But again, that was just Zira making a fucked up choice. I don't think you can blame necessarily the essence of the light for that shit.
has actually enriched both of them and made them a lot more
force yourself
interesting
on.
than I think they otherwise risked being. But to properly explore this stuff, we gotta go to our final zone, Voidstorm. Voidstorm then. Turns out we can't go there immediately. We end up having to do some questing with Magister Umbric. We go through a remade Magister's Terrace. It's quite neat. And of course, Void Elves being anywhere near the Sunwell is inherently dangerous. Not as dangerous as Illyria being there, because she does have that Dark Naru in her, but, you know, sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire. So, we go to Magister's Terrace, we then work out a way of getting into the Voidstorm, and then we go to the Voidstorm. And it certainly is one of the less visually lavish zones out there. It is a
Lothraxian. I haven't done this part of the story yet either, but I want to get some more Lothraxian lore, because what the fuck? How did they ever trust a Dreadlord in the Army of the Light? What is wrong with them? What is wrong? Clearly this guy's going to betray us. I haven't done any of the story yet, so I'm kind of still spoiler free on this. But what the fuck? We're going to trust a Dreadlord?
blasted void hellscape.
It just seems like a bad
looks
idea.
like one. And that definitely, while it works for the story, is something that I think I do need to hold against it.
You know, they say like don't paint an entire race, you know, with one brush or whatever. But I mean, I think we can assume at this point, Dreadlords have no loyalty to anybody except themselves. We have never been proven otherwise in this game. Never have we seen. Now, Lothraxian's supposed to be the opposite. He's supposed to be the one that proves that that's not true. But I think he's going to prove that it's true once again. He's going to fall right back into the Dreadlord trope of, you can't fucking trust these guys. They all have an ulterior motive.
Little bit. But by this point, I do think that we've been quite well rewarded with gorgeous environments through the other zones. So having a zone that just commits to its own desolation does actually work quite well. And Blizzard's artistic execution is still characteristically strong. I mean, you look up and you see all of the, I'm just going to say the void swirlies in the sky. Gorgeous skybox, lovely gradients, thumbs up. Even though it is, I think, quite almost objectively the least interesting zone that is here in this expansion. But what I did find is I enjoyed what was going on with the narrative there. The basic setup is we want to hit back at Xal'atath, but we've got to sort of establish ourselves there. So we head in with Lothraxian and Arator. Now, Lothraxian's, he's a funny guy. He's this light-forged Nathrazine. And you really get that sense of him being puritanical, zealous, reckless. And you can almost feel that as the Void gets stronger, of course, Light and Void being sides of the same coin, which we've always known because of Dark Naru, it's almost as if the stronger the Void is, the stronger the Light can almost be to meet it. But of course, the issue is that that light is being channeled through person, say Lothraxian or Tyrellian. And as it becomes stronger, more extreme, it does change their personality in ways. And I actually think they really did pull that off quite well.
Oh, cool.
And by the end of the questing here, he is quite ready to just blow everything up without thinking about the consequences in a way that is purely like some of the Scarlet Crusade incarnation of the light flowing through him. Just that he is, similar to them, misguided and self-righteous, so thinks he's absolutely doing the right thing. That culminates in a dungeon that, I don't want to go uber spoilery here.
Feels like the home
a dungeon
of
that I think I can see why some people would find it unsatisfying because of some lore implications. I think that ultimately it is a dungeon that has got narrative stuff in it that serves its purpose well, and ultimately to me was fairly satisfying. But I've talked about the light here. There's also the void, and one of the nice additions we get here, and we see explored, is how the void actually works. So it's not just Xal'atath and her little minions. No, the void is basically constant competition all of the time. And we meet this Dominar called Decimus. We end up working with Decimus, and it's great. Decimus, I suppose, does like us, does find us amusing, but it's not out of the goodness of Decimus's heart, is it? Basically, as they see it, Xal'atath winning would just mean stasis, right? Everything gets consumed. And Decimus thinks that would just be boring. What about the love of the game? What about loving intrigue, backstabbing, climbing the ladder?
Really, I like that. I haven't met Decimus yet, but that sounds like a pretty cool character trope. He's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to defeat the light. Kind of like this shit. Kind of like the adventure, the back and forth of it all.
Totally lives for that shit. worked
I like
really
Decimus as a
well, I
fun
think, as a
character. Yeah, he
character.
sounds fun.
So yes, a void entity, but one who is self-interested, who I guess has legible motivations, who does not feel like, oh, they're the void, therefore they're all the same and they're evil. No. What I like here is that in a world where it could quite easily have just turned into light is good, void is bad, and everything would be quite boring, I think they actually got a lot of nuance on either sides of the equation, and they made both of them, I think, more interesting. And with Decimus, it leads to a great character dynamic between our gang. Of course, Lothraxion is not a big fan of Decimus. And if you think about how, say, Samwise Gamgee would have been particularly skeptical of Gollum, Lothraxion is basically just doing that, but dialed up to 11. Now, when we go to Voidstorm, there's a big character we meet, Illyria. And, of course, Illyria has been gallivanting around that place since the end of the War Within.
Right,
and you
we
know
left
what?
her there in
Illyria
that
works
cinematic.
better here than she has in a long time. She's often been one note, always scowling, always chasing Xal'atath with little regard for anything else. It's often felt like a little bit of a repeat of Tyrande and Sylvanas. But actually, having her with the son that she cares about, but in some ways barely knows, actually does give Blizzard some new emotional material to mine, and the moments between
She's
them,
getting some character
whilst
development.
they can sometimes feel a little over-sentimental, a little bit over-cheesy, I think do broadly land. And that is saying something, because for Blizzard, these moments don't normally land, and often don't feel earned. But at least with these two characters, they do. And as someone who's been a little bit tired of Illyria as just a bit of a one-note character, I was pleasantly surprised. So, Light and Void both being represented as powerful and dangerous throughout the expansion. The Army of the Light's extremism somewhat builds through the story. It's expressed through them as a faction, but also through the actions of characters in a way that I do think works. And that's even though there's a criticism that's fairly easy to land, which is that a lot of this is fairly simple. And look, MMO main campaigns often
Light and
need
Void,
to paint
simple
in primary
story.
colors, and they end up leaving the nuance for the side quests. That is, by and large, what has happened here. And by and
That's
large,
why it's good.
it does work.
Yeah.
It does lead to some narrative moments where I roll my eyes at, say, some of the dialogue. But it works here a lot better than it has in past WoW expansions. And as compared to the War Within, one really big win it has is that the 80 through 90 experience actually feels like a cohesive story that is woven through all of the zones, that has got a finale that does actually make sense. That is a big win. Very often, WoW has just felt fractured to the point where people wouldn't even know what the main story is. But if you try to nitpick, and if you look at all of this with a critical eye, you will find loads of problems. And that brings me to what I think is the single most important thing for how we judge Blizzard. And that is the learning curve.
I think they've learned a lot.
Blizzard are making expansions faster
expansion.
than ever right now. The patch cadence has accelerated. I don't think perfectionism is a reasonable enough thing to expect from a team working at this pace on a live game. Because the thing about MMOs is that if you're too perfectionist about your content, a lot of your players will have just wandered off to something else, and it'll be very hard to catch them. It is one of those things where quantity can have a quality, but that does make things hard. And that means that whenever we look at a team delivering that type of content, rather than thinking about pure perfection, I think what we need to look for is evidence of a learning curve. Evidence that they're getting better expansion to expansion.
Yeah.
And broadly, you can see it here.
I
The
think
story
they have.
is cohesive.
Yes.
Zone to zone, the threats connect very
Agreed.
clearly. The narrative flows. Nothing feels disjointed. That is an improvement over the War Within, where the zones could feel overly separate and stapled together, even though they did have, lower through lines.
Yeah.
The pacing encourages side quest exploration in a way that feels natural. I found myself not wanting to rush to level 90. I wanted to be in these places.
It's a shocker,
The
right?
art, the level design, the world design were all absolutely outstanding, as they almost always are. The music is particularly strong this expansion as well. There are lots of nice little systems, like, say, the new transmog system. I know, there's been a lot of talk about its initial upfront costs, but I think it is a way better system. And getting housing decor from quest rewards and things does quietly change how a bunch of world content feels. WoW can just be more rewarding, even though it is a little bit weird to finish a quest and have a military commander dude hand you a table as your reward. But you know what? it's a fairly good reward. And then there's WoW's endgame world, where the new thing is the prey system. Basically, you select a target in a zone, and you kind of hunt them through these escalating ambushes. It's not exactly clear who is the prey in the prey system. It seems to be both you and the prey. Now, certainly, it's early days.
I said that
but when I
reviewed
was just clearing the map of world quests, and the prey stuff was happening as a layer on top of that, it actually did feel good. I was surprised how much it kind of worked for me. But then there's what I'm going to call the single worst part of this expansion.
Before he says this, has anyone interacted with the prey system? I haven't yet, but I feel like people are liking it. I just haven't done it yet.
And that's the dialogue.
Seems
Seriously. Now, to be clear, there's lots of great dialogue in this expansion. But for every bit of great dialogue, there is a moment, or maybe two, where I am yanked out of the experience thinking,
I'm gonna try it.
Oh my god, how did adults write this, knowing, the age of the Warcraft playing audience? It is the weakest layer of this expansion by quite some distance. Some of it feels like quest designers, I guess, RPing in their own D&D campaign. It's earnest, at times it's charming, but it's just not the level that I would expect for an IP like this. To take the character of Arator, he reads like he's 18 years old, not like 40-something. There are exchanges that should carry real weight, but they land at an almost children's show register.
Well, I mean, like I said, though, he's kind of a child if you look at elf years. And I said this before, I think maturity very much does coincide or correlate with lifespan. The shorter the lifespan, the quicker somebody or a thing matures. That's just how it is. And when you got 1,000 years to live, or however long these elves live at this point, they live much longer than humans do. You just mature at a slower pace because you don't have to. At the end of the day, maturity a lot of times is like an environmental thing, right? Where like the environment itself is forcing you to mature. Hey, guess what? You graduated. Time to figure shit out and fucking get a job. Like, that's just the environment putting pressure on you to grow the fuck up. And if humans live 200 years, we probably wouldn't start our careers at age, 25 anymore. That would just be prolonged. We wouldn't get married at the ages we do. We wouldn't have kids it's all fucking based on lifespan. So yeah, he's 40 years old, but he lives a lot longer. So 40 for elves is still a fucking child.
Let us lay waste to this
Disavowed.
realm.
Thank you for the follow. Welcome to our Scourge.
Perhaps another way of saying
man.
it is, it often feels written as if they know
Arator
the
should be in a
player
daycare
is
still,
scrolling
yeah.
TikTok on their phone while they're questing, and, it's like that Netflix
And
thing.
he's a half-breed,
You need
true.
to constantly restate everything all of the time, and that just means that it's a weak script at many points. And it's frustrating because often the plotting is good and loads of the character arcs work, the emotional beats land. It's just that if they had this plotting, this story structure, with better dialogue, they'd really be cooking. For me, that's just the clearest example of something in this game being way worse than I think it should be when taken in the context of the world, how long this world has existed, how long it has been made, and the resources of the Warcraft team. I truly do not understand where this dialogue is coming from. That being said, I have also watched modern streaming television shows, and certainly in some of them, you see similar dialogue patterns to what you see here.
Right.
So maybe there's
I mean, even the fact that Arator just got these fucking tattoos, right? For an elf at 40 to get tattoos, yeah, he's young and reckless, right? He got tattoos. He's still figuring life out. If a 40-year-old human gets tattoos, you're like, bro, you're having a fucking midlife crisis. What's wrong with you? If he never, and he just gets all tatted up on his fucking face and shaves the sides of his head, you're like, this dude's going through a midlife crisis. An elf doing it, you're like, yeah, he's young. He's fucking figuring life out. Whatever.
a broader discussion to be had at some stage about writing and media. I just don't want WoW to feel like a shitty YA novel, and at times it does. So to close things off, this is definitely stronger than my first impressions of The War Within. Now, my first impressions of The War Within were fairly strong in the context of having just been off Shadowlands and Dragonflight,
True.
which both had substantial
Yeah.
issues. So Midnight certainly is a good step up from The War Within. That's definitely a good thing. But I think the real significance for me is what this experience has kind of proved. And that is that Modern Blizzard can take beloved, established geography and make it feel right. That's often not a given thing. Remakes don't usually do
that's
that.
a big win
This
for
one
this
absolutely
expansion.
does. Flying over a rebuilt Silvermoon, you do just think, what if all of the Eastern Kingdoms was like this? What if I could just fly from Silvermoon City, from the Isle of Quel'Danas to Booty Bay, and for it to be of that level of quality? You know what? That's a really exciting prospect. And I think it validates World Soul Saga's direction. I mean, seeing how well they've done this, and knowing that The Last Titan revamps Northrend, well, that does have me properly excited.
Yeah,
and excited in a way where I just want to go there and experience that content now that I've had this sampler. And usually, the next expansion is exciting because you don't know what it's going to be. And of course, in many ways, we don't with The Last Titan. But knowing it's a Northrend revamp after seeing how well done this one has been, that's really good.
Could be good.
And it does suggest to me that the best thing Blizzard can do is not to spend all their time inventing new worlds and new lore, that it is actually just about doing justice to the world and the lore that they already have. That's my big takeaway from the future. Obviously, this is first impressions. How the overall expansion plays out could be a totally different kettle of fish. We'll just have to wait and see. But that's what I think about this one for now. And if this has got you interested in playing the game, I think you should watch this video next. It has a whole bunch of just tips and bits of knowledge that are just things we wish we knew before we got started.
Oh, great video overall from Bellular. I agree with a lot of his opinions. I do. Maybe not so much on the Arator stuff. I still think, I think, there's been some moments, but I think for the most part, I think he's been a pretty cool character. Overall, I am excited for what Blizzard's doing going forward, and it is because of those revamps to the world that they've done. I think they did a really good job with it. Northrend getting revamped, I totally agree with them. I'm very excited to see what they do with that. Revamp Ironforge. I think Icecrown is a capital city. I don't think so, but if they give us, like I said, we left the Vrykul behind now for a decade. They could have built up a city. If we get a Vrykul capital city, make playable Vrykul, damn, that would be freaking badass. And that music and everything, the Vrykul music, Grizzly Hills, Howling Fjord, all that shit, man, be great. I like what Blizzard's doing so far, and I like this expansion so far. Nice video overall from Bellular.